Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod. Take Omnipod Dash out for a spin with a no-commitment free 30-day trial. By Inhaled Insulin, fast in, fast out, fits your lifestyle. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, Sebastien Sasseville recently completed the Race Across America, a grueling 3,000-mile coast-to-coast cycling event that riders must complete in only 12 days. That means pushing through not just diabetes, Sasseville lives with type 1, but also figuring out eating and sleeping.
I remember kind of dreaming on the bike or falling asleep for a second, and then you kind of wake up, and that creates an adrenaline rush. That's not good. Like, I cannot fall asleep on this bike.
Sasseville has been an ultra athlete for 2 decades now. We get some more information about this race, why he wanted to do it, and how he managed type 1 throughout. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and you know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. I think this sounds okay, right? But I am not in my home studio right now. You should know. I took a few days to visit my daughter, Leah, who's spending the summer on the Carolina coast. She has an internship out here, so I am in beautiful Beaufort, North Carolina. Actually, it's raining right now, so it is a perfect time to tape the podcast. But I want to let you know if it sounds a little different. I think it's pretty good, though, but that's why. All right, some of you probably know about Benny's pump adventure recently at camp. I shared this in the Facebook group and on social media. I will tell you the whole story after the interview. That kid, never a dull moment. Although I will say that we found a silver lining in this issue. Everything worked out fine. I know I'm spoiling it before I even get started, but I'll share the whole thing a little bit later on. My guest this week is Sebastien Sasseville. Diagnosed with type 1 as a young adult, he is an ultra-endurance athlete who has gone up Mount Everest, raced across the Sahara, ran across Canada, biked across Canada, and this summer completed the Race Across America. I will let Seb explain exactly what that last event of the race is all about. It is hard to describe how grueling and intense it is with or without type 1. I love talking to Seb because he knows most of us are not going to accomplish these intense and amazing athletic feats. But he wants us all to think about pushing and doing more difficult things, no matter what difficult means to us. And I got to tell you, that has really stuck with me since this interview. I'm trying to think, what could I do? I mean, there's a lot that I could do to be more difficult, right? But what can I do that's realistic, that I will enjoy, and that I will follow through on? So I'm noodling around on that. And as you listen to Seb, I'm interested if this sticks with you as well. I've spoken to him twice before, and I will link both of those episodes up so you can go back and listen if you haven't heard them yet at my conversation with Sebastien Sasseville in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod. And when you're deciding on a brand of insulin pump, there are a lot of things to think about, especially if you've never used a pump before. It can seem overwhelming, there are a lot of choices, and you want to make the right decision. That's why I am so excited to tell you about the Omnipod Dash free trial. Curious about trying an insulin pump or seeing what life without tubes is all about? You can now try Omnipod Dash free for 30 days. The trial comes with no commitment or obligation. Not right for you? No problem. Terms and conditions apply. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo for full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions. Also visit omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Sebastien Sasseville, welcome back. It has been a long time since we've talked. Unfortunately, you haven't accomplished anything since 2015. It's kind of sad to see. Welcome back to Diabetes Connections.
That's why I'm here, to talk about the things I haven't accomplished.
Oh, no, stop. It is remarkable to watch you from the comfort of my chair. Let's jump in and talk about your latest accomplishment, the incredible Race Across America. I have lots of questions, but the first one is, if you wouldn't mind, can you explain what the Race Across America is?
The Race Across America is the toughest ultra cycling event in the world. So it's a bike race that spans over 12 states, so 3,000 miles. And what really makes this race special is that it's one stage. So when you leave from Oceanside in California and the finish line is in Maryland, in Annapolis. When the clock starts, it never stops. So you have 12 days maximum to complete the race, to bike 3,000 miles. And within those 3,000 miles, I think you'll find about 175,000 feet of elevation gain. So it's a tough bike race. And you have to be on your bike for 20, 22 hours every single day. The absolute slowest you can be, if you do the math, is 250 miles per day. It's a lot of hours on your bike every single day. 2 hours of sleep, 12 days in a row, something like that. It's a massive logistical challenge. I've said it from the get-go. We completed the race. We're incredibly proud. I raced solo, but I had a team, right, to support me. 10 people, 3 vehicles, in order to make it possible for one rider to go 22 hours a day. So it's a very tough and very special race, very mythical.
I have a lot of questions about much of what you said there. But before we go any further, tell me a little bit more about the team. I know that they don't get as much credit as you would like. Tell me, you said vehicles. What kind of folks are there? Are they helping you with everything from the mechanics of the bike to the mechanics of you?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So it's 10 people. So again, you're on your bike 22 hours a day and every minute counts. So when you get off your bike, for example, somebody grabs the bike and the mechanic will work on a bike for a few hours. When you sleep, there's a meal that has to be ready. The logistics, the hotel and motel reservations and the maintenance on the vehicles. We had a RV, which we called, it was a bit of our oasis. That's somewhere where the cooking happened, where the crew could rest as well. And then we had 2 minivans. So one is used as a chase car because it's a race. So there's a lot of rules. For example, you have to have the chase car immediately behind you from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then there's another car that was used as a shuttle because you need to move staff around. You need to go run errands, and that sort of stuff. So 10 people, I call them the blue bees because they're bees. They're just like working 24/7 to make this whole thing possible. So it was really remarkable what we accomplished as a team.
All right. I know the listener is thinking the exact same thing that I'm going to ask right now, and I've got to get to it, which is how do you function on that little sleep for that long?
You don't function too well. So again, that's why from the get-go, I said this was going to be a collective success, a team effort. My job as a cyclist is to push the bike forward. And that's pretty much all your brain can do because you're so tired. Cognitively, you're not that sharp after a few days. So the team is taking a lot of decisions for you. They decide of when you sleep, how long you're going to sleep for. They tell you how much you have to ride, what's the next cutoff and where you have to be at what time. They'll tell you what to eat and when to eat it. And they did jump in with diabetes management. The sleep deprivation is one of the main challenge here.
Wow. Did you ever have a time when you were, I don't want to say hallucinating, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind when you think about that little sleep for that long. Did you ever feel your brain kind of left the body?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is the toughest race on earth. You definitely go through phases where you have some sort of hallucination of altered reality that you're in. I remember kind of dreaming on the bike or falling asleep for a second, and then you kind of wake up, and that creates an adrenaline rush because that's not good. Like, I cannot fall asleep on this bike. So it's quite, fascinating. Everything you go through, very tough. And one thing I do want to say, because people ask like how you survive the race. And what I've experienced is that it's a very cyclical thing, meaning every single day when you get on your bike, you know that you will have a few very dark hours. Mm-hmm. And you also know that a few hours later, 4 hours later, you're going to be on that bike and you're going to have a blast. You're going to feel strong. You're going to be awake and things are going to be just great. And then a few hours later, you're back in that dark space again. So it's just about having the ability to get through those cycles and get through those dark times and just trust. And with experience, right, and you build resilience as well. You learn to trust that better, hours and the sun's going to come back up sort of thing, and that you're going to feel better. So, yeah, that's how you survive the race.
Wow. Let's talk about diabetes. You mentioned already that you had the team helping you with that as well. I don't even know what to ask, Seb. I feel like it would be impossible, and you've shown that it isn't. How did you do that? Tell me a little bit about your management and, how you just kept up your levels for this time.
A ton of practice. I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 20 years. This year is my 20th anniversary. I've, almost made a career out of exercise and diabetes. And, like everybody when I was diagnosed, like I didn't, it's the pump beeping.
I love that just as we're talking about diabetes.
Yeah, it beeps. Yes, I mean, it's like 20 years of commitment to learning about diabetes management during exercise. And I want to mention it before I get into the specifics, because that's very key. Like there might be some newly diagnosed people listening right now, looking at the race across America and just wondering, how is this possible? So it takes time. I want to say that. I mean, I'm an endurance athlete. It's a little easier to manage because you're just going slow and steady. You got to figure out how many grams of carbs you're going to need and figure an insulin strategy for that, and then stay true to that strategy. And it works.
Well, and we should say, you've had a lot of practice, as you said. This was not your first endurance event. It wasn't even your first endurance biking event. Last summer, you biked across Canada. How did that differ from this race? Obviously, it was a little bit more, I was laughing because I want to say it was a little bit more leisurely, but I'm sure that's not the word you would use to describe it.
No, because last year was so hard. I mean, the distance was 500 or 700 miles longer. What I was going for last year was the Guinness record for the fastest Trans-Canadian cycling. It did not work for a lot of reasons, and the weather was just horrendous. And I will say, like, I didn't have enough experience, so that impacted logistics and the vehicles that we chose and the skills that we had in the team. And we just did not, the truth is, and I didn't know at the time, but we just did not have the resources and the experience and the expertise needed to go after a world record. But we learned so much. And it was a tough venture. Like I covered, 6,000 kilometers, so a little short of 4,000 miles in 15 days and 17 hours. So it was not an embarrassing performance at all. Like it was still very fast, but we learned so much. And that's what set us up really well for a very strong performance at the RAM this year.
Yeah. Not to get too technical, I'm curious, what did you learn? Was it about diabetes? Was it about your bike? Was it about your form? I mean, what did you learn that you could apply to the race across America? Right back to Seb answering that question. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Afrezza. And I know you have a lot of questions about Afrezza because every time I mention it, the emails and the DMs come on in. So what is it all about? Well, Afrezza is an ultra rapid-acting mealtime insulin. You breathe it in using an oral inhaler, and Afrezza gives you the flexibility to eat when you want while providing proven blood sugar control. Afrezza's ultra-rapid action allows you to inhale your insulin right when the food arrives, even unexpectedly, so you can be spontaneous but still in control without the need for injections at mealtime. Find out more, see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease, such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Now back to Seb talking about what he learned from his past amazing accomplishments for the race across America.
I mean everything. So
Mm.
diabetes wise, there were a lot of surprises. One of them was, how much insulin I required. We all have this reflex of taking a little less insulin during exercise. Again, depending on the activity, depending on the sport, depending on the intensity and the duration. But general rule, I mean, I think everybody will agree here. You require a little less when you exercise. During this like very long endurance stuff, I needed so much more. It was fascinating. So we learned a lot about blood glucose management during those long events. And you also have to understand, I'm trying to shoot for 50, 75, 100 grams of carbs per hour.
Wow.
So you do that times
Oh
22.
my gosh.
Do you know how we're used to think of carbs in grams? Well, I'm at the kilogram per day level. You're going to need some insulin to absorb over a kilogram of sugar
Jeez.
per day. And beyond the race, beyond the events, the recovery for those big events, again, the amount of insulin required, because your body is so messed up and you're so sleep deprived, and it takes a week for you to start sleeping well again. And then the recovery can truly start. So, long story short, I'm on like 3 times the total daily dose during the first week. My 3 times my typical total
Wow.
daily dose for the first week of the recovery. Like I'm typically like at 40 units a day, and I'm 80, 90, 100, 110 units per day. Just insane numbers that you never see, not even during Christmas time. Right? You know what I mean? And then I could go on for hours. So like things like what kind of vehicles we need, what kind of skills we need in the team, just how to manage the logistics, how to move the team, because you're biking forward 250 miles a day. So all vehicles need to go forward 250 miles a day. The staff needs to sleep. Where we put him for that, like there's so much, right? That you got so many pieces to that puzzle. So yeah, learned a lot last year.
I'm curious, to keep that caloric and that carb intake, what do you like to eat? Or maybe you don't like it, but what do you eat when you're on these races?
A lot of things. I mean, whatever you are eating, you will get sick of it. Diversity is very important. You got to make sure you had a first layer of that nutrition that is, the good nutrition and the electrolytes and the right amount of fluids and the right amount of carbs. But then at the end of the day, you're on a bike 22 hours a day. No matter how much you eat, you will always run a calorie deficit. And you don't want to lose too much weight. You want to protect the body and the structures. So anything you can eat, basically, and you're chasing calories. So I would lie if I said that I didn't eat a lot of junk food and donuts and cookies and that kind of stuff as well, because you just need the calories. I'm literally adding MCT oil to my water bottles to fit calories any way we can in my body. So that is a very important part of your success when you're running a 10, 11, 12 days race.
I'm trying to picture how you're eating on the bike. The water bottle I get. Are you just eating and biking and you've got one hand and you're in control?
Yeah, you have to.
These are such dumb questions. I'm sorry, but I'm visioning.
No, not at all. Because it's like it's the tip. Like everybody wants to know. Like, you stop to go to the bathroom, or you do that on the bike. I mean,
I'm sure I want to ask that.
Well, you do that on the bike, right? Some of it. So yeah, you have to eat on the bike. We add what we called our moments, our performance. So that was Seb to bed and then Seb to bike. And the goal was 15 minutes. There's no time to have breakfast and chit chat. Like the team wakes you up. There's a team helping you to get dressed and put the shoes on and the sunscreen, and somebody's working on your pump while somebody's applying sunscreen on you while you're trying to get dressed. Like there's like a rush there. It's like a Formula One pit stop. When you get on your bike, the GPS is already started. There's like a breakfast in your bento box that somebody put there, and you go to work.
Why on earth do you do this? It's amazing to me. You've done so much over the years. Why do you keep doing it? It doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I got to be honest with you.
It is a lot of fun to me. That's why I do it. And that's the simplest and most sincere answer. I just love to do these big challenges. It brings pleasure and joy to me. And that's as simple as that. Now, of course, there is some suffering involved from time to time. I think it's very important that we do difficult things on purpose. Modern life is becoming easier and easier. And I will say that this is not always true. And a lot of us are very lucky. But for the most part, you kind of go to work and they give you money and then you can buy food and that's it. There's no, you know what I mean? Like there's no lion chasing you anymore.
Right.
So it's very important that we create situations in our lives that are tough, that are challenging. And you do that so that you learn, so that you grow. The greatest gift from that journey is that I have experienced that when you choose to do difficult things, your beliefs expand. What you think is possible expands and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why I want to continue to do these things. For so many years, the Race Across America, it was science fiction. I did not understand how it was possible, how people were able to do these things. And then I got to a point where I thought I could sign up. I could be a part of it. And then I had a decent performance this year. And now I'm at the point where I think, I believe I could go back and do even better. So that has a big impact on your personal life, on your professional life, when what you think is possible continuously gets bigger.
Not everybody is going to climb Mount Everest or do the Race Across America. But as you said, doing difficult things, especially with diabetes, shows what's possible and how far we can push things. Since I've talked to you, I've seen so many more people with type 1 do amazing things. It just seems as though there's this generation that's grown up, was never told no, or if they were, they ignored it. They're playing professional sports. They're Broadway stars. Do you feel that has shifted since you were diagnosed? You said 20 years ago you were diagnosed.
Absolutely. And it's a wonderful thing. It's absolutely wonderful. I remember starting my speaking career and going to the big diabetes conferences, and there weren't a ton of people living with type 1 diabetes, and not only in sports or professional sports, but just at the highest levels in different fields. And now it feels like there's people going to space with type 1. There's professional athletes in every single sport, and there's artists and singers. That feels so good. It feels good because it's so obvious. There's no more debate. You live with type 1 diabetes, you can do anything you want, period. Even if it's something that hasn't been done yet, there should be enough cool stuff out there to give you the confidence that you can be first in whatever that is your thing. And that's absolutely brilliant. And that's because of a lot of people that were really courageous, that took first steps, that said, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this because I want to do it. It's going to better my life, but it's also going to have an impact on others and open doors for others. So absolutely brilliant.
I have to ask, your Instagram bio says, accidentally climbed Everest. What do you mean by accidentally climbed Everest?
It's funny because I changed that profile just recently, and like a limit on how many characters you can have for your bio. And obviously I was promoting the Race Across America more heavily recently, and I got to a point where I can't fit all of the accomplishments.
You didn't. You left out the Race Across the Sahara, you left out a ton of stuff.
Yeah, I'm an endurance athlete. So, and I mean, it's funny you asked this question. The goal is not just to display everything you've done, but I'll say one thing. The joke I made there about Everest, for so many years, it was a big thing. And I didn't think anything I would do after Everest would top that, right? And it's incredible how, I am very proud, but it's a footnote now because you climbed Everest in the 70s, you were a superstar and you went on a worldwide speaking tour. And Everest is not that today. You've got 100 or 200 people on the top of Everest every single year. Everybody knows someone who's climbed Everest.
That's
now.
true, I guess. Gosh.
I'm not going to say it's not that special. It is.
Yes, because I would argue with you, but I hear what you're saying. But yes, it's still incredible, but I hear what you're saying.
But I can think of so many things because there's an aura around Everest, right?
Hmm.
And that's not going to go away anytime soon. But I can think of so many things that are way harder than Everest, and way more rewarding in terms of athletic challenge. And Everest was very personal. And then when I wanted to do Everest, I was a young kid, and then you're a young adult, and I wasn't really mature, and there was a bit of a glory associated with Everest. It was appealing to a young man in his early 20s with no maturity. Things like the run across Canada, which had such a big impact, and it was by everyone, it was for everyone. It really felt like it was a community-based project that had a massive impact. Yeah, so I feel these other projects were so much more impactful.
I remember when you ran across Canada, and we, as a community, even though it was online, I know there were people that greeted you in person, but for most of us, we were following along online, but it was something that was a community event. It's interesting that you look at it that way, because I I will still think that Everest is an absolutely incredible accomplishment, but it is fun for the diabetes community when we can follow along more closely. Like the race across America too. We could even see you. There was a website where we could follow you hour by hour. I mean, it was absolutely incredible to see. What was it like, though, when you did finish the race across America? I mean, you're exhausted. You've got to be kind of bananas in your brain, like you're not really functioning fully. But what was it like to finish that day?
The first thing that came to my mind is that we finished.
Mm.
We succeeded. And then we had a big group hug, and I'm never going to say this enough. I rode solo, but I was part of a team. And without the team, I could not have made it. And I think it's very true of diabetes as well, right? You need a team. And I had the simplest job. I think I had a tough job, but my job was really easy. I just had to pedal. And without the cook, without the bike tech, without the drivers, without the navigators, without the crew chief and everybody, none of that happens. So I felt immense pride about what we had accomplished, because again, people were following the race daily, and we had a phenomenal video and photo guy, and they were like working 24/7 just to edit at night so that we could pump out really cool videos every single day. They were such a huge part of the success. It's because of these two guys that thousands of people were able to follow along every single day. So, and there's also the fact that we've been working on this for over a year. So nobody saw that. Nobody saw when we were meeting once a week for a year, for an hour.
Sure.
Nobody saw that. And it was just seeing a ton of work come to fruition. And that felt really, really, really good.
Obviously, not everybody is going to jump into these incredible feats right off the bat. Any advice for people who are inspired by you but are worried about exercise with type 1?
Great question. I started with kilometer run and had to walk. We all start at the same place. The advice is you have to experiment. You have to start slow. You have to focus on learning. Diabetes and exercise, there's no recipe. It's not a recipe. It's not something you will figure out and then you just apply the same formula. Every day is different. So your job is to understand all of the different factors and variables that push your blood sugar up or down. And then every single day you're looking at today's data, today's circumstances, and then you build a strategy that's customized for right now, for today. Focus on learning every single day. And there's so much to learn. And I personally learn every day still. So don't be overwhelmed by how much there is to learn. Focus on learning a new thing every single day or every single week about diabetes and exercise. And before you know it, you'll feel a lot more confident about managing type 1 during exercise.
I remember, it just occurred to me when we talked years ago, you said something like, well, I'm not really an athlete, or I didn't start out this way. And I think we do have this picture of folks like you 2 years old and running marathons. But you, as you said, you started very slow.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure that's something I said when we first talked, or when we talked last time. I was that guy who was picked last in sports every single time when I was a kid. I'm not naturally gifted in sports. It's just work and discipline and commitment to making this work. I mean, obviously, when I was a kid and you're in school and you're playing team sports, that was not for me. I'm not good at that. But then later in life, I discovered I was built for endurance and individual sports. Everybody runs now. Everybody's active, but a lot of people hate running, but they run because everybody runs, right? So don't do that, right? Find a sport or an activity that you really love and enjoy doing, and that alone will make diabetes management a lot easier.
I meant to ask when we mentioned the tandem system, did you use exercise mode? Do you use the different modes, if that's not too personal to ask?
It's not personal at all, and I did use them. So what I do when I exercise, I go on the exercise mode in the activity menu. But if you do that on top of a normal basal, that is still way too much insulin. Mm-hmm. I also create an exercise profile that is equivalent to a 50% reduction of basal. You cannot do a 10 basal on Control IQ for now. So I go on that profile a good 60 minutes before exercise, the same way that I would do a 10 basal. And again, all of that is dependent of current blood glucose and what did I eat last, when exactly I'm going to start exercise. Because if I'm going to exercise right after a meal, 60 minutes after a meal, or 2.5 hours after a meal, those are like three very different scenarios that will require three very different strategy. So exercise mode, an exercise profile that's equivalent to a 50% reduction. And what's also very important is the correction factors and ratios that have to be extremely sensitive. So like my typical correction factor is 1 to, well, I'm in millimoles up here in Canada. So I make that correction factor like very sensitive, like 1 to 150, for example, like something like that. Just so the pump's not going to give me too much insulin when it's correcting during exercise. Another advice I also like to give is think as an athlete first. Basically, depending on the sports, I build my nutrition strategy first as an athlete, because whether you have diabetes or not, you're going to require the same nutrition to perform. So I build my nutrition strategy first, and then I bring in the diabetes in the equation, and I ask myself, so how can I absorb those carbs at those times? And I build the insulin strategy after, so that I have the fuel that I need during exercise.
I will wrap this up by asking the horrible question that you must get every time you finish something amazing, which is, what are you thinking of doing next?
Next, I mean, my answer is going to be boring. Next is a little bit of rest. Next is think a year or two without a big project. I think it's important. I think I'm at that stage in my life. I will do the race across America again sooner than later. If I sign up for next year, like immediately, I'm like all my weekends are gone, right? I just want to enjoy life a little bit right now. Enjoy the simple things, go on vacations, have a beer once in a while. Those really, really simple things. What's next is probably the race across America again in 2024.
Well, you've definitely earned those vacations and that beer. I mean, take it easy as much as you ever take it easy. Do you exercise in a very strong way when you're off like that? Is it still miles and miles of stuff, or do you really just take it easy?
It's still going to be a central part of my life, again, because I love it. This is not a burden. This is not something I do because someone is asking me to do. I love exercising. It enhances my personal life and my professional life. Instead of going for a 12-hour ride, I might cap it at 3 hours. Like 3 hours of solid riding is enough, right? Be healthy and then fit. And so that's what I'll do. So many times this year, I was training for RAM and going for those long 5, 10, 15, 20-hour training ride. And I'm 3 hours into it and I'm thinking, that's enough. Like 3 hours is enough to be healthy and fit. Like I could just stop here. So, and you got to keep things balanced and just remind yourself of what's truly important. So I don't think it's going to be hard to go on those shorter rides and just, yes, be active every single day, but not necessarily do like the very, very long and crazy stuff.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, for being such an inspiration, and for doing these hard things and inspiring us to try more. I really appreciate every time I talk to you. I am inspired. And I thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information about the amazing Sebastien Sasseville and about the race across America and all the other stuff he did. I love how he says Everest is ordinary now, right? Old hat. But all of that over at diabetes-connections.com. Obviously, I disagree with him on most of that. And if you follow him on social media, and I will link up all the places where he is so you can follow him. If you do follow him, you have seen that he's back at it. I mean, he's training, as he said, just slightly, because he really enjoys it. I think that's fantastic. All right, as promised, my son, the disaster, I will be sharing the story about what happened at camp. As you probably remember, he goes to a non-diabetes camp every summer, and he is there for 8 weeks. Right now, we're almost to the end of it. But of course, we had to have some pump adventures while he was gone. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. I want to talk for a minute about Control IQ. That's the Dexcom G6 tandem pump software program. When it comes to Benny's numbers, you know, I hardly expect perfection. I just want him happy and healthy. And I have to say, Control IQ, the software from Dexcom and Tandem, has exceeded my expectations. Benny is able to do less checking and bolusing and is spending more time in range. He really is doing so well with this. You know, at a time, as a teenager, when I was really prepared for him to be struggling. And his sleep is better too, with basal adjustments possible every 5 minutes. The system's working hard to keep him in range, and that means everybody is sleeping better. I am so grateful for this. Of course, individual results may vary. To learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Oh boy, where to begin with Benny? Well, he's been at camp for, when this happened, I want to say 5.5 weeks, maybe almost 6 weeks. So we're really coming to the end of this, and he's been doing great. I mean, I don't really know how he's been doing because I don't see any numbers, but from everything I can tell, he's doing just fine. He checks in with the health center as per our plan every couple of days. He leaves his insulin and supplies there, so he has to go. And they like that because they have to see him. Everybody wants to make sure they have eyes on him. This is not a diabetes-trained staff. They're mostly, school nurses and really wonderful healthcare providers who know a little bit about diabetes, but you know what I'm talking about. These aren't endos or CDEs. So it just makes everybody feel better, since he was little especially, to get eyes on him and make sure he's doing well. So he's at the health center and he's filling the cartridge in the pump. If you're not familiar with tubed pumps, they take a cartridge of insulin. It's a separate piece from the pump. You fill the cartridge with insulin, usually from a vial, but you can use a pen as well, or, whatever. And then you pop the cartridge back into the pump, prime it all while it's detached from your body. We've had that adventure before too. And then reconnect everything. So while he's at the health center, he's changing the cartridge. And I didn't ask for too many details, but here's what I know. As he's juggling the pump and the cartridge and the vial and probably joking around and being his usual goofball self, he dropped the pump on the very, very hard, likely cement floor of the infirmary. Yes, the screen shattered. Interestingly, the pump still works, so it may just be a screen issue, which I may get replaced when he gets home. Take it to a cell phone shop. Don't listen, Tandem people. But this was a pump that was out of warranty. So if your first thought is call Tandem and have them replace it, out of warranty pumps, they're not going to do that. But we had a good reason for sending him to camp with an out of warranty pump. It's because his in warranty pump was right there with him. This is a kind of a world's worst diabetes mom story, I guess, but we got his new pump last fall. I want to say September or October, something like that. And it's been sitting in the box ever since because, as Benny said, and I really couldn't argue with him, why are we going to take out the new pump and update it until Bolus by phone comes out? And I said, yeah, all right, no problem. So he's been using his old pump since then, and it's been working just fine. And it made it great to send to camp because the backup was all set. We turned it on, we programmed it with the basal rates and everything else it needed, and stuck it in with his carton of diabetes supplies. So when he broke his old pump, I said to him, if you want Bolus by phone, we were fortunate to be in the early adopter or early release here. I had all the information for him. And I said, if you want to do it, you can do the training. I did the training for Control IQ. You can do this one. He was happy to do it. He said it was incredibly boring. Oh, well, kid, welcome to adulting and your own insulin pump stuff. But he did all the training. He downloaded it and he has the mobile bolus feature now. And he loves it. I don't know. I mean, I know a bunch of you have it as well, and more will have it as it rolls out. I think it's super convenient. I mean, I'm thrilled that it's a feature because I know how much we used it, especially when Benny was little with the remote. I mean, bolusing your kid who's in a car seat or as your kid is sleeping. But as an individual who now has remote bolus, I'm really curious to hear what you all think. He has texted me every day since that happened, telling me how much he loves it and how much better he's doing at bolusing for meals as he's eating them or before. And I think some of that is the newness, right? It's the novelty of something new. But I'm curious to see if it continues. So that's the silver lining. Longtime listeners may remember that in 2019, the last day at camp, Benny also shattered his pump. And those are the only 2 times in the almost 6 years now that we've been using Tandem that something like that had happened. So it's not that common. It does happen. It always happens to Benny at camp. I'm hoping that he can make it for the next couple of weeks. Oh, and that reminds me. Okay, wait. So I hope he can make it for the next couple of weeks without it shattering. Everybody in the group was so helpful sending in ideas. Benny said he finally wanted a case. He's never put a case on his pump, and I've never insisted. So we got all these great suggestions. And the guy at Type 1 Tactical, CEO Travis at Type 1 Tactical, reached out and said, let me send one to him. Let's see if he likes it. This is a real heavy-duty type case that everybody in the group was raving about. So one of those is on its way to Benny. And I'll let you know what we wind up using for cases or skins. I mean, this is a highly personal thing, and it's up to Benny, whatever he decides to use. But I thought you all were amazing with your fabulous suggestions. And Travis, I really appreciate it. That's a big deal. So I'll keep you all posted. Am I ready for camp to be over for Benny and get him home? Not really. I mean, it's not that I don't want to see him, but he sounds like he's doing great. And he feels, I think this has given him so much independence. It's been a really good summer for him so far. So of course I want him home, and I want Leah home too. She's been away all summer here at the coast. So let's get those kids home so I can hug them for a week or two before they both head out again. She'll go back to college. He's got his senior year of high school, and I never see him anyway between school and his job and any sports or activity he does. So I'll take my hugs where I can get them. All right. Thanks for sticking with me all the way here. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.